Andy Burnham saying, I have been very clear that we will honour these commitments. It does mean being prepared to look at challenging issues. I hate I have been very clear. It means you're waffling. And I hate challenging because it means it's impossible.
The Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary are in Barrow-in-Furness trumpeting spending on nuclear weapons, but the announcement today doesn't contain any new money, and neither of them will commit to spending 3% of national income on defence by 2030. So I suppose, Andrew, the sort of doom loop of defence conversation continues, doesn't it? We've not quite broken free since we got the Strategic Defence Review, the Defence Investment Plan. We're just kind of going round and round on this, aren't we?
Well, we've not broken free in the way we can't really break free of the rules of gravity. I think we're in it's a terribly serious subject, but I think we're in the realms of magical thinking here. It's like that this housing building target. I mean, we've built zero houses practically, and we still be building 50 billion by 2030. It reminds me of that old Greek paradox about the arrow that covers half the distance to its target and then half that distance and half that distance and never actually arrives. Except in this case, it's not a paradox. It's a fact. I mean, just listen to the weasel words. Andy Burnham saying, I have been very clear that we will honour these commitments. It does mean being prepared to look at challenging issues. I hate I have been very clear. It means you're waffling. And I hate challenging because it means it's impossible. And then Wes Streeting, who's a politician I instinctively like because he talks quite bluntly. Today he's saying he's not ruling out committing to 3% spending by the next Parliament. Well, I'm not ruling out becoming editor of the Times. It's just not very likely.
Yeah, I suppose the other part of it, Melanie, is what Andy Burnham and Wes Streeting are both keen to do is to tie this already announced defence spending to supporting 22,000 apprenticeships. And actually, Andy Burnham's just posted online in the last few minutes, the submarines produced in Barrow protect us all. The jobs and apprenticeships they create change lives. This is Britain re-industrialised. Is that a sort of change in message, do you think? He's trying to tie economic growth and well-being, I suppose, to this defence investment?
I think it's a genius idea because spending on defence in some respects involves investing in the manufacturing infrastructure. And his big thing is reindustrialising Britain. And if you can actually make quite a lot of that industrialisation to do with the defence industry, then bingo, you've covered two bases. And in Barrow-in-Furness, in particular, you've actually got something quite specific there in terms of the nuclear industry. And it used to be the same with shipbuilding in Scotland, that too linked to the Ministry of Defence. The big difference, I think, between his fantasy commitments and Keir Starmer's fantasy commitments is that he's actually got a very different Chancellor. I mean, John Healey resigned on precisely these grounds. Yeah. And so I think if you've got somebody at the Treasury, at the top, saying that the money is available, supposing we make cuts elsewhere, and Burnham's already identified welfare. I mean, the welfare bill is going to cover a multitude in terms of the cuts. It's going to provide money for elsewhere. But I think the fact that the Chancellor is actually behind the idea at the outset is terrifically important, and he might actually kind of drive this, whereas the notional Defence Secretary may be a little lagging behind.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Andrew, on personnel, isn't it? John Healey resigned over this when he was Defence Secretary. I mean, there's no world in which this government can't get to 3% by 2030, politically speaking. They have to deliver that or they'll look ridiculous.
Governments do look ridiculous, and this is the problem with new governments coming in and making promises that they can't keep. It's going to increase the disillusion in 3 or 4, 5 years time. I'm really worried about it. I mean, I think Melanie's obviously right. This is squaring the circle if you can re-energise the economy, especially in poorer parts of the country, by industrialising defence. But these factories will take ages to build. We're well away from it, and I'm slightly uneasy at the idea that our economy is going to be predicated on war. I mean, it's just this wartime economy we're suddenly in again goes against everything we were told after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the peace dividend. But I suppose I'm just going to have to grow up and accept that.
I think there's an interesting point here about the time that you mentioned there, the time it's going to take to build factories, the time that is needed to put into these plans to see them come to fruition. Does any single government have the time to do that? And we're also looking at years and years of defence spending falling. It hasn't been kept up the way that in hindsight everyone now says that it should. And I just wonder if there has to be more cross-party commitment for us to get anything done. And regardless of who sits in government, are we all going to be sitting here having exactly the same conversation?
That's true in every respect, isn't it? That all of the really important issues can't be addressed within the lifetime of the government, which is, for that government, the all-important parameter. And so I think that it's true of sort of social care as well. That will take time to come about. But particularly for long-scale projects like the nuclear industry, that really does take at least a decade, I think, to come into being. But in the meantime, we've got extraordinary developments happening very, very quickly under our noses. I mean, the war in Ukraine has actually changed how we expect war to function. That is to say that the use of drone technology has been absolutely transformative, and it's happened terribly quickly. And we have to be, I think, reactive and speedily reactive in terms of the adaptation of that technology. And the poor Ukrainians haven't had a choice. They've had to develop it on the hoof. But that is one area where you don't have to have a vast manufacturing capability established over a decade, where you can actually affect change really quite quickly, as the Ukrainians have proved.
I mean, so then could the legacy of any single government be creating a defence strategy that every other political party signs up to? And Andrew, could you ever see that realistically happening?
Well, I think it's about social care for the elderly. There's no real ideological divide amongst the mainstream parties about the need for a stronger defence, or about the need for coping with people who are getting old and sick, and are becoming very expensive in a society where people live longer and healthier lives, but then deteriorate towards their end. So I don't see their votes in this. It's not like an ideological divide over cutting the welfare spending for needs,
sure,
for people who apparently could work but aren't working. I always thought this actually about Brexit. I mean, the public came to a wrong decision that both of the major parties, three major parties then, were dismayed by. But yet the Conservative government decided there was nothing like a crisis for an opportunity, and they thought they could actually win votes and elections out of making this a partisan issue. A cross-party approach to Brexit would not have led to the Brexit we're finally living under.
We're going to stick with the conversation around politicians, but this time whether or not they should be on social media. Now, one of the Times leading articles today says that politicians like Green leaders Zach Polansky need to spend less time scrolling online. This is all in result of the fact that Polansky has come under fire over the last few days for resharing an Instagram post that pictured a man with a T-shirt saying, "We're only making plans for Nigel, next to a guillotine." Now, the Metropolitan Police told us late last night that they are not taking any further action here. But it does beg the question, do we need to get politicians off social media, especially if there is always a litany of mistakes happening, especially if they're always apologising for what's been shared or not seeing what's been shared? I mean, Zach Polansky said that it was an inadvertent mistake. They took it down straight away. He didn't apologise because he said he shouldn't have to apologise for mistakes. But is it just a little bit of nonsense having social media for politicians, or, Melanie, do they actually have to be there because that's where the people are?
Well, nowadays, it's meant to be obligatory that you have to have a social media presence. Otherwise, you don't impinge on the consciousness of anybody under kind of 30. So it's felt to be an imperative. I personally would prefer it not to be, because as other commentators have pointed out this week, it's actually a form of broadcasting, but it's broadcasting without any of the normal constraints that we've been used to. So, for instance, on this programme, if Andy Burnham or Wes Streeting come on, then things are challenged. What they say is actually disputed, and you may have somebody else who's actually on the programme to put the other point of view. Whereas on social media, there are no such disciplines. You can simply put it all out there without any of the constraints from traditional broadcasting, and I think it's actually quite pernicious. And of course, it's terribly superficial. Andy Burnham's good at it, whereas Keith Starmer was bad at it. He's recruited a young woman from Ed Miliband's team, which was actually one of the more effective aspects of Ed Miliband's kind of stint at the top. And that particular team that he's assembled has turned out to be very good at churning out stuff that's easy on the eye, that's feel good, that isn't particularly contentious, and actually gets places. But the danger about all this, as I say, it's been pointed out already, is that you've got no comeback from the opposition. You've got nobody challenging their claims. You've got nobody saying, well, hang on, it's great that you're sharing crisps with Wes Streeting, but can we actually get back to the question of are you going to deliver defence spending by 2030? All these things are not provided on social media. It's an entirely one-way medium. And it's terrifying, because we've ended up with social media having this proportionate influence as opposed to the conventional media that we're involved with. And I don't think it's healthy for democracy.
I mean, you make some really good points there. Andrew, do you agree? We've got this new bill coming through in which under 16s are not allowed on social media. Should we also add politicians to the bill?
I think it's a brilliant idea, yes. And everybody says how brilliant that pork scratchings video was between Starmer and his Chancellor. I find it absolutely nauseating. And what particularly annoys me about this Jack Palahniuk thing, Palahniuk's a very skilled, instinctive politician, and the reason he hasn't apologised is because it's kept the story in the news. And the only two people who are amused or interested in all of this, or who can plausibly claim outrage, are Palahniuk and Nigel Farage, both of whom are leading parties that are right down in the polls right now. So we're all talking about it. For Palahniuk, by not apologising, he means that the this silly T-shirt, which is actually based on an old rock song from my youth in 1979, by not apologising means that the people who are faintly amused by it, and I'm not, we'll get another giggle. Meanwhile, Farage can claim the moral high ground, which is a place he doesn't easily occupy normally.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Nigel Farage there as well. Just as a side note, he does refer to himself as a influencer. I mean, social media is integral to what he does. I mean, I think that's quite amusing that he's referring to himself as an influencer, because actually politicians, should they be influencers?
Yeah, I guess they all are to some extent. What are they influencing and who are they influencing?
I suppose there's a difference between being an influencer and taking brand deals and money from X, Y and Z and whichever companies, and actually influencing policy to help the people in your constituencies and being an influencer for your constituents. I suppose there is a difference.
Fair point. Andy Burnham hasn't done that many interviews, as we've been alluding to already, since becoming Prime Minister, but one person he has spoken to is Jimmy McLaughlin, a former Downing Street advisor who has a podcast called Jimmy's Jobs. The Prime Minister spoke about his own imposter syndrome and said his Cambridge University education wasn't as helpful as you might imagine in finding a job.
My dad had always said to me, Cambridge University, it will just throw all the doors open to you. Because he had to persuade me to go. What I realised was, when you kind of live through it, it's actually connected parents that often make the difference. And I've always been a politician that's fought to change that.
What do you think about this, Melanie? It strikes me that you're going to become... Say again.
It really is. It is actual nonsense. I mean, this is a man who clawed his way into Cambridge on 2 attempts. He got turned down by St Catherine's College, and he made much of the fact that he was offered sherry during the interview. And the interviewer, the Don, asked him to find comparisons, I think rather brilliantly, between the Canterbury Tales and A Modern Package Holiday. And I think that's actually really an interesting question. But anyway, he didn't get into St Catherine, so very far from being deterred by the whole Cambridge thing, he tried again and got into Fitzwilliam. And his tutor there, John Mullen, who's a brilliant academic, he was saying that as far as he remembers, Andy Burnham had an absolute ball at Fitzwilliam. It was a football-y sort of college, but quite sporty, and he was completely at home with all that. And they went out with the coolest girl in college, his present wife. And so the whole notion that this was some sort of ordeal for him does not square with anything anybody says about his time there. What it has done, actually, is given him a chance to humble brag by saying how terrifically difficult it was for him. But actually, what it's done is given him the self-confidence to swim in the waters he swims in now. That is to say, he can look anybody in the eye, he can be at ease in any company. He's used to grand surroundings, admittedly not in Fitzwilliam, which is a really ugly college, but elsewhere in the university. So I think it's absolute fake, and I don't think we should buy it for a minute.
What do you think, Andrew? This is somebody who's been in and around politics for, 20-odd years, been the health secretary, he is now the Prime Minister. You know, Cambridge University must have had a part in that, surely?
Well, it doesn't seem to have done him great harm, does it? I can't even say this without, I know at least one friend in the newsroom saying you're always on about going to Oxford. But I do remember coming just before I went up. Here, another thing I shouldn't say, I suppose. I remember my mother reading through all the protocols and rules and dress codes and stuff for Christchurch, and she said, "This isn't for the likes of us." And I thought that's absolute nonsense, and I had a very good time there. But Lucy Powell, she didn't have a good time when she went to Oxford, not Cambridge, but went to Oxford, and she left for another university after a year, and she hit, I think, on the main problem of people like us going to, not people like Melanie, but people like me going to Oxford, is that they did. Well, it's what Lucy Powell said. It made me feel totally thick, and I just spent 3 years thinking I'm surrounded by these absolute geniuses, and I have very little to contribute. So I was very happy to escape to the much shallower waters of journalism, where of course I comparatively thrived.
Oh yes, and there you're surrounded by other people who went to Oxford and Cambridge, so you can be completely at home. I think it's all this is complete and utter nonsense. I think I was the first person in my family to go to university. Both my parents left school at 14 and went straight into work, one in a pottery and one in doing secretarial work. I came from entirely the wrong kind of background in that respect, though I did go to get a scholarship to a school in England after I finished in Ireland. And so from the point of view of background, I can give Andy Burnham a run for his money when it comes to the humble brag. But the thing about being there is that you're surrounded by very bright people. At least you were. I don't know whether it's the case now. But it raises your game. You're actually used to engaging with abstractions. You're used to engaging with difficult questions. You're surrounded by people who aren't terribly impressed by you being the brightest person in the room, because you're not anymore. And it's actually very, very good for you.
And I think the point has to be acknowledged that there is a reputation from Cambridge or Oxford, and Andy Burnham saying, my Cambridge University education wasn't as good as you might imagine in finding a job. I imagine if Andy Burnham and someone who went to no university, or even perhaps a polytechnic university at the time, it will help. There is a prestige. People will react to you in a very different way. That has to be acknowledged. Okay.
You don't mention it. I think if like Andrew, you just let slip very, very gently that it was Christchurch that you went to. You don't actually make a thing of it at all, but it's just picked up on. Then that's the perfection, because you're not bragging. In fact, the point is that you shouldn't brag, but you just let it be known.
It's like wild swimming, isn't it?
Yes.
Go on, Andrew.
My first job was working on a paper in Sheffield, and then the Rotherham office, and of course the fact that I was I was a middle-class posh boy from Oxford, did me no good at all. But it wasn't my fault I'd been recruited. The editor of the Sheffield Star, who hadn't even been to university, but was a very good journalist, had worked for a while on the Sunday Times under Harry Evans, and he was surrounded by all these people that Melanie's talking about, the Oxbridge people. I thought, I need to transform this paper, this provincial evening paper, into sort of evening Sunday Times for South Yorkshire. And he recruited all of us Oxbridge types there who of course knew nothing about the area, and but even by opening our mouths caused offence.
Yeah, it doesn't work everywhere, perhaps. Good. I think we're probably out of time at that point, although we did start a campaign today to save these people. Steve!
Possibly the most annoying clip we've played all morning. Apologies.
That's from Walk on the Wild Side, the BBC show. Melanie, would you be sad to see the name Steve disappear?
I'd be sad to see this name Stephen disappear. I really hate abbreviations. Steve is rubbish, and I think Stephen is lovely. So Stephen is the proto-martyr, the first martyr in the Christian Church, and I think it's a lovely name. It's got great iconography, and I'd be really sorry to see it go.
Well, apparently there's more Mavericks than Steves now. Andrew, how do you feel about the name Maverick?
Maverick's terrible because it's normative determinism. So people are going to get jobs and say, "Oh, I'm a bit of a maverick." Me, it's like the DJs used to say, "I'm a bit mad." Me, and of course they're going to be
really boring.
They're going to be they're going to be the most conformist, ass kissing people in the entire office. But I'm like, well, no, I'm going to get a few names back though. Like my auntie Ethel and my grandmother was called Vera. And the only problem with that was that her surname was Douglas, and she used to sign her notes V. She used to sign her notes VD. But as long as your surname doesn't begin with a D, Vera's a lovely name. And Maud is the name of our cat.
Very good.
Oh, lovely. That's perfect.
I can say, "Come into the garden, Maud."
Very good.
That's wonderful. What I want to bring back is the name Mary. It used to be the most commonplace name of all, and now hardly anybody is a Mary. I want to bring it back.
Okay, noted. We have taken your name suggestions on board. I'm sure there's a whole campaign in what name you would like to bring back into rotation. Andrew, Melanie, thank you so much for talking us through the quagmire of the day.
It's so good to have you both on. Thank you both very much.